Hey, this is Henry, and welcome to today's tutorial. What we're going to be doing today is building a simple to-do list with the PERN stack. And in case you don't know what the PERN stack stands for, it is P for Postgres, E for Express, R for React.js as our front-end framework, and an N for Node.js as our backend language. Now, by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding of how all these different types of technologies interact with each other and go on to building more complicated applications. Now, let me give you guys a quick demo. So let's say I need to clean my room, which I really need to do. So I can add that. I can even edit the information. So let's change this to car. Yeah, I'll just keep it like that. And then I can also delete the information. So even though this is just a simple CRUD application, and it is trivial, there's a lot of things that's happening between the front and back end. So in the next section, we're going to go over a diagram overview of how this application is going to work and give you guys the big picture. Now, before I move on, there is going to be some prerequisites, or more like pre-setup. Like the first thing you already need is to have Node.js installed. Second, you also need to have Postgres installed. And if you don't, I'm just going to give you guys a video I'm going to link it at the bottom of my video. That's going to show you guys how to properly install it. Besides that, you guys need to have a basic understanding with JavaScript, React.js, and if you understand Restful APIs, that's going to also help you guys a lot throughout the whole process. But besides that, I'll see you guys in the next section. Okay, so let's just quickly go over this diagram to get the big picture. So you can see that this is going to be our front end. So right here, you can see the submit button along with the data that's going to be able to get edit and deleted. So anytime I click the submit, edit, or delete button within my React application, what I really am doing is sending an HTTP request to my RESTful API, and depending on the HTTP request and the route that's being hit, it is going to tell my database, or it's going to instruct my database of what type of CRUD operation needs to get done. Okay, so anytime I click the submit button, I'm sending a post request to create a to-do. Anytime I want to edit something, I'm sending a pull request to update to do, delete, and then when I want to read it to do, I'm going to use a get request. So I think one of the hardest part about learning how full stack application work is really understanding RESTful APIs. So I'm going to really oversimplify the definitions, but this is really all you need to know. A RESTful API uses transfer protocol in order to run CRUD operations. So what I mean by that is that our transfer protocol is going to be HTTP requests. So we have access to post, put, delete, get, and a lot more, but these are the four main ones. But essentially, we're going to be using these HTTP requests, and then our RESTful API is going to take them, and then it's going to instruct, the keyword is instruct our database of what type of CRUD operation needs to get done. Okay, so a lot of the misconception that a lot of people have is that CRUD operations occur within the RESTful API, but that's not true at all. Rather, the CRUD operations only occur within the database. Whether that's Postgres or MongoDB or MySQL, it only occurs within our database. So I'm just going to say this, our RESTful API is just going to take our HTTP requests and then it's going to instruct. Okay, so hopefully that makes a lot more sense. And in the next section, we're going to start building our RESTful API. Okay, so let's start building our RESTful API. So the first thing I did was created a simple PERN to-do folder, and you can name this whatever you want, but really the big idea is that it's going to hold our client and server folder. So I'm going to first do mkdir server, and then I'm going to cd into that server. So you can see here it's popping up right there, and immediately I'm going to run npm init. So npm init is going to keep track of all our packages inside our application, and we're going to answer a few more questions to give more details. So entry point is what's going to glue our application together. So after that, I'm going to do npm install, express, pg, and cores. So what are these libraries? Well, Express allows us to quickly create a server in Node.js, and then we have cores, which allows different domain applications to interact with each other. So for example, our server is going to be running on localhost 5000, and our React application is going to be running on localhost 3000. And then finally, PG is there to connect our database with our server in order to run some Postgres queries. Okay? So once we set this thing up, I'm going to say touch index.js, which is going to again be the glue. I'm going to go over here and require the libraries. So I'm going to require express, and then I'm going to create a variable called app, which is going to take my express library, and then it's going to run it. Now, app pauses all these cool methods in order to create a server. So anytime we want our server to start, we have to listen to a port number. So app.listen, port 5000 is what we're going to be listening to. And then I'm going to have a callback function that's going to indicate it has started. So server has started on port 5000. All right, so let's kind of test this out really quick to see if it works. I'm going to say node index, and indeed it does work. But the thing is that I don't want to use Node. I highly recommend that you npm install globally nodemon, because every time we want to see changes, we have to restart our terminal and turn it back on. So by using nomon, you're going to watch a single file, and then every time there's a change that's going to be done, it's going to instantly restart it. So nodemon index. Okay, and you can see it's going to be watching that file. And then the next thing I want to do is create some middleware. So middleware, I'm going to use app.use. So anytime you're going to create a middleware, you have to use app.use. And I'm going to put cores. And I totally forgot to require that. So const cores. Okay, so now that that's set up, that's all we have to do. And I just kind of want to jump ahead as well, that anytime we're building a full stack application, you need to get data from the client side. And the only way to get data from the client side is that we have to get it from the request.body object. So let me show you how we can do that. So by using this, oops, let me go back inside here. So this right here essentially is allowing us to give us access to request.body, and then we can get JSON data. Okay, so if this is still a little bit confusing, we're going to build, and I'm going to reference this a lot. Okay, so I'll see you in the next section, and we're going to create a database and a table for our Postgres. All right, so let's get started building our database and table. So I'm going to first show you guys this diagram to give you guys a big overview of the commands we're going to be using. So you can see this is our Postgres. Inside there, there's going to be a lot of other databases like to-do databases or hotel database. Now inside these databases, we're going to have a table. So in this case, I'm going to create a table, or I'm going to create a database called to-do database. And then inside there, I'm going to create a table called to-do. Now the purpose of having a table is that if there's anything that's related to room, for example, in this database, then it's going to be placed inside the room table. Anything that's related to guests is going to be placed inside the guest table. Okay? And writing a database or creating a database is as easy as saying create database and then specifying the name along with the semicolon. And then after that, we have to move inside that database, and then we have to run create table to do. And we don't stop there. We also have to define a schema. And the reason why a schema is so important is because we don't want to put anything inside our database. You want to be specific on what we're going to be putting inside there. And then finally, as you can see here, we have all these different commands that we can run within our Postgres terminal in order to make it easy for us to move around. So let's get started. So I'm going to go back to my Visual Studio Code, and right off the bat, I'm going to create a file called database.sql. And the reason I created this is because it's going to make it more visually pleasing when we write our commands. So let's create a database. So create database, and we're going to name it as PERN to do. All right, semicolon. And then next we're going to say create table and then to do. Now I have to specify what it's going to look like. So let me just set this little parentheses up. The first thing I'm going to do is to do ID. And the reason why I have to do ID is because I want to ensure that this to do is going to be unique. So for example, anytime I'm trying to delete, or I'm trying to update or get a specific to do, I just want to reference this to do ID because it's what's going to make it distinguishable from the other to dos. And then I'm going to say serial primary key. Okay, so what is this? So primary key is exactly what I just said last time. It essentially indicates that this value right here, or this column, is going to make this entire to-do unique from the other to-dos. And then we have serial, which is going to be this function that's going to increase our primary key to ensure uniqueness. So if you're still a little bit confused, don't worry about it. We're just going to go over that while we code this thing. And then finally, I'm just going to have description inside here. And I'm going to say, give it a varchar of 255, which means I'm setting a max character of 255. We just wrote our commands, and now you should already have installed Postgres. So let me just put this aside. So I'm going to open this command line right here. So you should already installed it. And then what you're going to run is PSQL-U representing as user, and we're going to be using the user Postgres. So anytime you install Postgres, you automatically have a user by default called Postgres, which is a super admin. And a super admin has full access to everything. And then it's going to tell me what's my password, and that's what you wrote inside your installation process. So when you install Postgres, it told you to put a password inside there. So we're going to put it inside here. Okay, so I'm inside my database. So let's kind of run through the commands that I was talking about. When I do /l, it is going to show me all of my databases. So for example, if it's still a little confusing, essentially all of these little things that you see over here on the side is representing each of these databases. Okay? So once I have this thing down, I could do Control-C to get out of this really quick. Okay? And then inside here, I'm going to see that I have JWT off. So I'm going to move inside that database. So I'm going to say /c JWT off. Okay, so now as you can see here, it's saying that you're connected to the database JWT off as user Postgres. Okay? And then I can look at all the tables that's inside there by simply saying /dt. So in this case, this has a single user table. Okay, awesome. So now we're going to make our own database. So I'm going to go inside here. I'm going to grab this command, and I'm going to put it right there. And check this out. It's going to say database created, or create database. And then once we have that down, we can do /l. I can see right there that we have indeed added it to our database, or added to our Postgres. I'm going to do Control-C again to get out of here. And then I'm going to move inside there. So /c into PERN to do. So you can see it does the same exact process. And now I'm going to run /dt to see whether or not we have any tables. And you can see here it says did not find any relations. So now we take this thing right here, and then we put it right there. Okay, so awesome. So we created a table, and now if I do /dt, you can see that indeed we have created a table called to-do. Now I think it's also worth mentioning that you don't have to call this to-do ID. You can also call this TID as well. So I'm just going to show you this command later, but essentially it's going to get all of my to-dos. You can see that right here is what we define our schema as, to-do ID and description. And like I said again, it doesn't have to be to-do ID. I'm just being explicit. Some people just like to say TID, or you can do whatever you want with that. Okay? So in the next section, we're going to connect our database with our server. Okay, so let's start connecting everything together. So connecting like our database with our server is really easy when we use the PG library. So what I'm going to go is create a file called db.js, and this is going to configure how we're going to connect to our database. So I'm going to say const pull require PG library. So remember we installed that PG library and .pull. And now we can instance this pull by saying const pull equals to new pull. And now we can set up our configurations inside here. So what's inside? We have to first specify our user. So in this case, we're going to be using the Postgres user. And then we have to define a password as well. So kthl8822 is mine. We also have to say what the host is, which is going to be localhost. And then we are also going to specify our port, which is going to automatically run on port 5432. And then, which is also very important, we also have to specify the database, which is going to be PERN to do. Because as you can see here, we created this database called PERN to do, and that's the database we're going to be using. So awesome, that's all it takes to connect to our database. So I'm just going to export this guy. So at module.exports, and then pull. Okay, so since that's all set up for us, I'm going to go back into our index.js, and I'm going to require that. So by using the pull, we can run queries with Postgres. Oh my god, what's happening? /db. There you go. Okay, and just to kind of give us a heads up, I'm just going to start writing the routes that we're going to be working with this pull query stuff. So the first one is that we want to create a to-do. Next one, I want to get all to-dos, get a to-do, update a to-do, and then finally I want to delete a to-do. So we're going to work on each of these routes, and we're going to be using this new connection that we have over here to run queries with our Postgres. So I'll see you then. All right, so let's start building some routes. So right off the bat, we're going to start with create a to-do. And to do this, we're going to say app that post. The reason it's going to be post is because we're adding data, and I'm going to name this route as to-dos. Okay, and I'm going to run rec.res, which represents requests from the client side, and response we're going to send back to the client. And then I'm going to use async. Now the great thing about async, by using this, we're allowed to get these really cool tools that makes asynchronous requests easy. So for example, anytime we're creating data or we're trying to get data, it's going to take some time. So async provides us something called a wait, which waits for the function to complete before it continues. Okay? So you'll see that pretty soon. So then we also have try catch, which makes our error handling so much more easier. The reason for that is because it's going to run a regular code, and anytime it finds an error, it's going to catch it, and it's going to throw it out. And this is how our basic error handling is going to be done. Okay, so now that's done, inside here, I need to be able to get data from the client side to determine what exactly I'm wanting to add. So remember how I said we need to do something called express.json? So I just kind of added a comment over here that's going to let us add request.body. So by using this, we can access this object right there. And if you don't know what it is, I can just console.log that thing. So I should have given you guys a heads up, but I am going to be using Postman. Postman's great when it comes to wanting to test your applications or your RESTful APIs. So in this case, I'm going to create something new. And you can see right off here that we have all these different types of HTTP that we can use. So in this case, we're going to be using posts. And I also need to specify that I want to hit the /todos route. So let me do this really quick. So I'm going to say HTTP /localhost 5000 and then /todos. Okay? And now, remember how we can access this request.body. So I'm going to go inside to body right here. I'm going to say raw, and I'm going to specify it's going to be JSON. And then I'm going to create a JSON data. So in this case, remember, we're working with description. So I'm just going to say description is, I need to clean my room. So now, if I click send, and we look inside here, you can see, indeed, it pops up right there. Description, I need to clean my room. And this is exactly the data that we're going to use to save it within our database. Okay? So hopefully that clears things up. So remember, we have this description that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to destructure that. So I'm going to say const description in a request.body. Okay, so time for some actual queries. So I'm going to say const new to do, and then I'm going to say await pool.query. So remember that pool is what we just created right there. And now we're going to start running some queries. So in order for this thing to work, in order to add data, we have to use the insert into command. So insert into. And then after that, we have to specify which table we're trying to insert into, which is going to be the to-do. And then we have to specify what type of column we're trying to add data into. So in this case, we have a simple description. And then we have to specify the values of that. And this is going to look a little bit weird at first, but we're going to have something called $1. So what is this? This is going to be a placeholder, or essentially going to be a variable that's going to specify this description. So we're going to have this second argument inside this query, which is going to define this $1. So remember how we have the description, which is coming from our client side. I'm going to put it right inside here. And now, our description is going to be the value of this $1. Okay? So if it's still a little bit confusing, don't worry about it. Let me just res.json this, and I'll explain it again. Okay. So I'm going to do this really quick. And now I'm going to open my Postman one more time, and I'm going to try to hit it. You can see we had a status of 200. And don't be scared, but you're going to see a lot of gibberish. So you see all of these things. but this indicates that we have done something successful. So if we look inside our database and I say select all from to do, like I said again, you don't have to know this command yet. I'm going to explain it later. But you can see that indeed that we have added that data inside our database. So pretty cool. And look, you don't have to set it as $1. That's just the PG library allowing us to add dynamic data. We can actually just do it straight inside here. So for example, I can just say like insert into to do description, because I'm trying to hit this column right there. I also have to specify the values of this guy. And I'm going to say single quotes, like let's just say hello, for example. And then that's all I have to do. So you can see I inserted the data. And if I decide to see what's inside there again, you can see that I have added hello. So nice. And you also see that we're incrementing this thing, 1, 2. We didn't do that, but because remember we set serial primary key, it's going to automatically increase it to ensure that we have uniqueness. All right? So hopefully that made more sense. As you can see here, that this $1 is just going to allow us to put in some variables of what we're trying to add inside our database. So you can see that we have all of this ugly thing over here. So we want to make sure we're returning back the data. So what we have to do is say returning star. So returning star is used whenever you're inserting data or you're updating or deleting. So anytime you're doing these type of actions, you're going to return back the data. So let me show you again. If I go inside here and I try to hit this route, you'll see we'll get something different. So you see this? We have now all of this data, and you can see that this is the data that we just added inside there. I need to clean my room. To do ID 3. And we want to just hit this rows right there because we don't want to see all these other things. So inside, I'm just going to say new to do, that rows, and then I'm going to hit the first item. So now I'm going to hit it one more time. I guess I should change it up a little bit. And this is good for us because we are really, in the next route, we're just going to try to get these to-dos. So now if we go to the bottom, you can see we have something that's a lot more easier to read. So awesome. Okay, so we created our to-do. Next, we want to see all our to-dos. And this one's really easy. And you're going to memorize it right off the bat. So I'm going to say app.get because we're just simply wanting to get data. I'm going to say /todos. And then I'm going to do the same process, request.res. I'm going to use this async stuff. Try catch. So this is really my regular convention that I like doing. Console.error, error.message. And then inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to be saying const all to-dos, await, because it's going to take some time, pull.query, and guess this, select. So remember we use select, oh my god, if I could spell it, select all from to-do. And that's all we have to do, really. So remember how I kept running this command just to see my to-dos? This is exactly the same as that command. So now I can say res.json, all to-dos. Remember, it's going to be in this row stuff. The only reason why I don't have to say returning star is because the purpose of select is to even give us the data back. So we don't have to say returning star. So let's check this thing out. So I'm going to go inside here, and I want to see all of my to-dos. So I'm going to make a GET request, and check this out. How cool is that? So now we have all these different to-dos that we just created, and we can just spit it out by simply running this command. All right, so pretty simple. So in the next step, we are now wanting to still get a to-do, so it's still going to have this thing, but we want to get a specific to-do. So it's still going to be app.get because we're getting data. Now I'm going to say /todos, and I'm going to also do :id. So what is that? So let me just finish this really quick, just the basic setup. Okay, try catch, error, console.error, error.message. Okay, so what is this thing? Essentially, this allows our URL to be it's going to allow our URL to be dynamic. So we have access now to something called console.log to request.params. So whatever the client specifies in the URL, it's going to spit this out with the variable of ID. So it's a little confusing, so let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go back inside here, and you can see that we're going to try to hit this route. So I can say /todos, and then I can just write something random. So indeed, that's what I'm going to write. Look inside here. If I click enter, you can see that we have an ID of random. And this is actually coming from this area right here. You can see we specify ID. I don't have to call it this. I can just name it whatever I want. And if I save this and I enter it again, it's going to do the same exact process. So subject random. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, because that's what we're going to be using to specify what type of to-do we want to get. So you're going to see later on we're going to specify it as 1, 2, 3, you name it. So let me just change this back to its regular form of ID. And yeah, okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to destructure this. So const ID from request.params. And then now I'm going to try to get this ID. So const to do, and I'm going to say wait, because it's going to take some time. Pull that query. Now select all from to do. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce a new player, which is called the where clause. And the where clause specifies what type of to do we actually want. Sorry about that. What exactly we want. So in this case, I'm going to specify the column to do ID, because remember we named it inside database.sql. I'm going to say where the to do ID equals to $1. And I'm going to specify it with the ID. The reason why this is important is because I can specify this as to-dos, and I want to get the 1. So it's going to say select all to-dos where the to-do ID equals to 1, 2, or 3. So you'll see this in action real soon. And then I'm going to simply say res.json to-do.rows, and I'm going to get the first item, because we're just getting one to-do. All right, so let's see that really quick. So in this case, you can see that we have all our to-dos right here. And I want to get number 3. So you know what? Let's do number 4. So if I click enter, you can see that we get our specific data. So nice. So by using the where clause, we can be specific on what we're trying to get. Okay? So pretty simple, and we're going to work on the next route, which is going to update a to-do. This one is probably a little bit more complex from the rest, but still not as bad. So since we're updating information, I'm going to say app.put. I'm going to specify it as to-dos, and it's going to be ID. So the reason I need to specify ID because I want to know what exactly or which to-do I need to update. Then I'm going to run async, so the regular stuff. And then what I'm going to be doing inside here, let me just finish this really quick. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing inside here is I need to have 2 things. Remember, we have access to the request.body to get information about the description that we're trying to add to the database. And we also have request.params to specify what type of to-do we want. So we're going to need both of them in order to update. And I'll explain why. So we have ID over here, request.params. And then we're going to have const over here, which is going to be, what is it? Yeah, description. Request.body. So awesome. We're going to be using these tools to update our information. So here's how the query works. I'm going to say const update to do, and then I'm going to do a wait again, pull that query. And now this is the query I'm going to run. I'm going to say update. That's all I have to do. I have to run update, and I have to specify the table. So update and to-dos table, and then I have to run set. So what do I set? I have to set the description column to whatever I specified right there. So I want to actually set the description to the description that's specified on the client side. And then I also have to specify where it's located at. So I have to say where the to-do ID equals to $2. Okay, so this may look a little confusing, but remember how I said these represent variables. So we don't have to just do $1. We can do unlimited amounts. Like you could even go up to like $100 if you need to, right? But basically these are just variable holders. So all I have to do is go inside my second argument array, specify the first value, which is going to be description. So this is representing this one right there. And then I have to create a comma right here and specify ID. So this ID is coming from here, and it's going to represent this $2. Okay? And now I can just do res.json, and I'm just going to keep this simple. I'm just going to say to-do was updated. Okay? So let's see how this is going to work. So I'm going to go inside here. I'm going to try to change I need to clean my car. So let's go up here really quick. And let's say I need to clean my floor. So now I have to change this to put because I'm trying to update this. And now if I click enter, hopefully it works. You can see it has a status of 200. And indeed, to do was updated. So let's just double check to make sure it did. So if I go inside /4 and I look into the bottom, oops, I have to make this to a GET request. It did change. So it says I need to clean my floor. So cool. We're able to update our information. And if you're still confused, like I said again, I'm going to do a quick review over all the queries we just did. And finally, we have delete a to-do, which is really easy. It's exactly kind of like the GET request. So what we're going to be doing is app.delete, because we're deleting data, /todos, and all we have to do is specify the ID. In the regular process, request.res, try catch. Since that's all done and ready to go, we don't have to add data to a delete. So all we have to do is specify what exactly we want to delete. Okay, and inside there, we're going to say const delete to do, and we're going to do the same process, await pull that query, and I'm going to say delete from. So I'm going to run this command, delete from, and we have to specify in the to-dos table, and then all we have to do left is say where it's located at. So where the to-do ID equals to $1, and that is just going to be, as you guessed it, ID. And then we're just going to do another res.json and just say to-do was deleted. So congratulations. Well, actually, no, we can't say that yet until we test this out. So let's make sure that we can actually delete this one right here. So in this case, I want to delete that fake sample that I created over here. So hello. So I'm going to say /2, specify it's going to be a delete request, because remember I specified it as delete. And now if I click enter, to-do was deleted, and let's make sure it does get deleted. Oops, I have to make a GET request. And check this out, it was deleted. Okay, so congratulations, you officially created a RESTful API with Postgres. So in the next section, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the queries we did, so you can have a better picture of what happened. So I'll see you then. Alright, so congratulations for building a RESTful API with Postgres. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick review because I want this to really ingrain in your mind. So as you can see inside here, we had a basic server that we set up, and then we did something called database.sql. So this made it more visually pleasing for us to write our commands. Again, you don't have to do it this way. You can just put it directly inside the command line. So what we did was create table, PERN to do, and then we created a, well, sorry, not create table, we created a database called PERN to do, and then we created a table within that database called to do, and we had to define two things inside there. The first one we defined was the description, which was given a max character of 255, and then we set something called to do ID with the primary key. And the reason why it's so important is because we want to ensure uniqueness between all our other to-dos. Because if we want to delete, update, or get a specific to-do, we will have to reference something that distinguishes the rest of the other to-dos, which in this case to do ID. And then you can see primary key indicates that this to do ID is what makes it unique. And then we have the serial function, which automatically increases the primary key to ensure that's unique. As you can see inside here, that's what happened, 1 to 2. Now, in order to connect to it, it was as easy as taking in the library, so required pg.pull, and then we just had to configure where and how we were going to connect to it. In this case, we have to specify the user, the password, the host, which was localhost because it's running on our local machine, our port, by default, Postgres runs on 4432, and then our database, which was PERN to do. So as you can see, the reason we connected to PERN to do is because that's what we specified. Okay, so now when we go to index.js, we start to create some routes. So whenever you're creating something inside Postgres, you have to use the insert into command. Okay, so the insert into command specifies the table that you want to insert something in and the column, which is going to be description, and then you have to enter in what that value of the description is going to be. In this case, we had $1, which was really strange for a lot of people who just started, but essentially this is just a simple placeholder, and this value is going to be specified and the second argument array, which is going to be description. So this description is going to represent this $1 over there, okay? And then, and also it's worth mentioning that all of these different commands that you see here, these queries that I'm having over here, can just simply be run inside the command line themselves. And also we have returning star because we were adding data, so we want to get back that data again. So anytime you're trying to insert or you're trying to update or delete, you have to use returning star to show what exactly you're using. And then we had to do res.json.roast because that's where the data is located at. And finally, inside here, we just had to do select all from to-dos. And this allows us to get all the to-do from that table right there. And as you can see here, you don't have to specify stars. I don't know if I was specific on this, but it doesn't have to always be select star. Star is just simply there to say that we want to get everything. So if I go into my command line and I say select, instead of star, I can say description from to do. I just get the description. So I can be specific on what I'm trying to get. So instead of actually trying to pass everything to the client side, I can just minimize that and just pass what I really need to pass over to the client side. And then we just res.json that data. And inside here, we introduce a new player called the where clause. And the where clause allows us to be more specific on what we're trying to do. So in this case, remember, we were trying to get all to-dos, but only where the to-do ID equals to what we specified in the client side. So we just say where, specify the column, and then the number it equals to. Then we worked on update, which was a tiny bit more complex, but it was still nice and easy to work with. So we have to use the update command. Specify the table, and then we have to use set, describe the column that we were trying to change. So we set that equal to the description defined in the client side, and then we have to specify where that to-do we want to updated was going to be located at. So we have to say where to-do ID equals to whatever you specified inside there. Okay, and already you can see we had $1, $2. You can go up to any $signs you want to. It's just that inside your array, you just have to specify it inside there. So if I added a $3, I will have to add it inside this array as well of what that equals to. And then finally, delete, which was really easy. All we have to do was specify delete from command, specify the table, and see where it was located at. Okay, so we use that where clause again. So pretty simple stuff. So congratulations. So in the next section, we are going to start creating our client side. So just so you guys can see, I'm just going to create a new terminal over here. And then I'm going to say npx create react app, and I'm going to define it as client. Okay, so after this thing finishes loading, we'll just start building our application. All right, so as you can see, my client side has finished loading. So before I even jump into cleaning this thing up, I just want to show you guys quickly this diagram again and the different components that we're going to be working with. So let me just kind of zoom in a little bit. So remember, we're going to be having 3 components to this front end. So we're going to have first a input component, then we're going to have a component that's going to show all the to-dos, and then last, we're going to have a component that's going to open our edit modal. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to go back inside here, and I'm just going to clean some things up. So we don't really need these anymore. Oh, we're going to need them eventually, but let's just focus on the client side. So I'm going to go inside here, and I'm just going to clean some things that we don't need. So in this case, we don't need this. We also don't need this logo SVG. I'm also going to get rid of the service work here. Set up tests. All right, and then we're going to go to index.js, clean all these things out really quick. All right, along the server worker, we don't need that anymore. And then I'm going to go to app.js, and I'm just going to get rid of this logo stuff so we don't have any errors. And I'm just going to take in the fragment. If I can spell it right. And I'm just going to clean this all out. We don't need these things anymore. All right. I'm going to put fragment inside there. And there we go. And just to make it even better, we're just going to create a new folder called components. So we're going to talk about those 3 components we just did. So we're going to do new file. Remember, we're going to have a search input. So input to do.js. Then I'm going to make another component, which is going to list all of our to-dos.js. And then finally, I'm going to make a new file that's going to have the edit to do. Okay? And that's pretty much the setup for our components right now. And also, we are going to be using Bootstrap 4. So let me kind of get that set up for you guys as well. So go inside here, Bootstrap 4. Then we're just going to open this thing up. And just go down here, take the CSS. And we're going to put it inside our public index.html. So I'm going to just put my link probably right here. And if you want to, you can just get rid of all these comments. They're not going to help us really. And finally, we are going to be using a modal. So I'm going to take this, all this data right here, and then I'm going to put it right there. Right there. And I'm going to put it near the body. Okay? So pretty neat. Okay, so that's pretty much our setup. So the next section, we're going to start building the input to do. Alrighty, so let's get started. So I already went to my client folder and I did npm start to get everything ready. So let's go inside our input to do and let's start setting some things up. So I'm going to start saying import React from React, and then I'm going to make a simple component just to get enough on the board. I'm going to return a simple h1 that's going to be input to do. And I'm going to export default this. And then I'm going to require it within my app.js. So let's go inside here. And I'm just going to add a comment that's going to say components. And it's going to say import input to do from /components /input to do. All right. And now I'm just going to put it right there. All right. And now if I look in over here, you'll see that I have input to do, and it's a little bit too close on the side. So I'm going to make sure that I space this thing out with a container. Okay. I'm going to take this guy over here and I'm going to put it, oh no, not there. I'm going to put it right there, and it should be a lot more spacious. So yeah, it's a little bit better, and I kind of want to make that to the middle. So let's go into input to do, and now we can start doing some real things. So I'm going to make a fragment, and I'm going to put my fragment right here. And then I'm going to put my h1 as PERN to do list, okay? And I'm going to add a class name of text center. And I'm also going to add a margin top of 5 because it, as you can see, it was a little bit too close. So that looks nice for us. And the last thing we need to do next is that we need to create a form because we are going to submit something new. So I'm going to create a form over here. We don't need this action. And I'm going to have input right here. Type of text. I'm going to keep it like that. And then I'm going to have a button that's going to say add. So let's see how that looks like. Pretty ugly, so we can make that look a little bit better. So class name, I'm going to add a btn, well not btn there, but I'm going to say form control for here. That should make it a little bit better. Okay, and right off the bat, you see it's kind of knocking the ad out. So let's just kind of decorate that as well. So I'm just going to say class name btn success, and then after that I'm going to add a deflex because this thing goes 100%. So I want them to be together. Now, as you can see now, it's going to be put together. It's awesome. And it's still a little bit tight, so I guess I'm going to add a margin top 5 there as well. I'm just really abusing this margin top 5. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Okay, so now it's time for us to reactify this thing. We want to start containing our state within this. So I am going to be using React hooks, so I'm going to use useState. And inside here, I'm going to put it on the top. So I'm going to say const, and I'm going to say, let's call it description. And then we're going to say set description. And I'm going to set it to useState and add a default value of an empty string. Now, if you don't understand this, basically this is our state, and this right here is the only way to change the state. And then we have useState to show our default value. So now I'm going to go to my input, and I'm going to set the value to that state that I have over there, which is description. So just to prove my point that this is our default over there, I'm just going to add something like, for example, hello. So now if we look inside there, you'll see by default we have a hello inside there. Okay? And we can't change it because we don't have an on change yet. So I'm going to open this thing up. And what I'm going to do next is that I want to change or update the description. So I'm going to say onChange, and I'm going to use E for event, and it's going to do set description to E.target, so it's going to target whatever's in that input, and it's going to get, as a result, the value of it. Okay? E.target.value. So now, if I just type inside this thing, I can just add random values, and it's going to update. And we want to get rid of the hello, because we don't want to start with that. Okay, so pretty neat. So we have this React stuff set up. Next, we want to be able to submit our form to send data out. So how do we do this? Well, let's create a function that's going to call onSubmitForm. So I'm just going to, you know what, yeah, I'll just make this error function. And inside there, I'm going to use my try catch again. So I got to use that async stuff. And I'm going to set this to error. So console.error, error.message. And I'm going to put an E inside here because it's going to send an event. And we don't want this thing to refresh. So I'm going to say E.prevent default. Okay. And now inside here is where we're going to start like sending a request. So I'm going to package this description over here. So I'm going to say const body equals to description. So I'm packaging it all up. So normally you'll have a lot more than just a simple description if you're building a complex application. But in this case, I'm just going to keep it like this. And then I'm going to say const response, and I'm going to start sending a request to add data. So I'm going to say fetch, so I'm going to use the fetch. I'm going to specify http://localhost. So I'm trying to add data, so remember, I have to go /todos. So by default, fetch makes a GET request. So we have to add some more configurations. So I'm going to set inside here that our method is actually going to be a post request. Okay? And what I'm going to be sending inside there is going to be JSON data. So I just have to set the headers to content type. And the content type is going to be a result of application / oops, let me get rid of that, /JSON. Okay? And then finally, I have to, what am I going to be setting over there? So I have to have a body. I'm going to have to stringify this, package it all up, stringify, and then I have to stringify that body over there. All right, looks pretty solid. So let's kind of test to see where this works. And I'm just going to go console.log response to see if everything works well. Now you should have your server on because we're going to start interacting with it right now. So let's go over here, and I'm going to say, okay, so let me open my little console. I'm going to clear all this so it can be a little easier to read. Let's say I need to wash the dishes. So now if I click add, let's hope it works. Wait, I just noticed this thing just refreshed. Okay, so that's a problem because, oh yeah, because I didn't connect it to my form yet. Okay, so yeah, we have to do that first. So I have to say onSubmit. So this is going to be triggered when it's submitted. And then I'm going to run onSubmitForm. And now it should be working. So now I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to write in my data, like, now I need to wash the dishes. And now I'm going to click add. It's doing a promise, and that's what I totally forgot. So remember, when you're making a fetch request, it's going to take some time, so we need to wait. We need to wait for this thing to finish, and then we can console.log that response. Okay, so now, and I hope finally this thing is going to start working. And again, it's just a work in progress, so no problem at all. And I'm just going to write I'm just going to say hello. Clear this up, and I'm just going to add it, and cool. We had a status of 200. So let's make sure we really did get that data. So open up your command line over here, PSQL -u, so the regular process again, kthl 8822, and then I'm going to go into that PERN to-do stuff that we created, and I'm going to say select all from to-do. I'm going to determine whether or not I actually have it. And look at that. I have the data over here, and I was able to add the other one. So that's neat. So you can see hello was added over there, and if I decide to add another data, let's check this out really quick. Cool, it works. So we're able to add data. Okay, so since that's all set up, in the next section, we're going to start working on the list to do so we can display all our information. So I just realized I wasn't complete with this component. Instead of saying console.log response, I actually want to do window.location/. So once the response has been sent, it's going to refresh and show the changes. Okay, so make sure you change it to this. Next, I'm going to go inside list to do's and create that component. So I'm going to import React from React. And then I'm going to say const list to do's. And I'm just going to be returning something really simple, just to get us started. And I'm going to call it list to do's. And then I'm just going to export default this guy. Okay, so that should be all set up, and now I'm going to go to my app.js again, and I'm going to import that /component / what is it called again? List to do's. And I'm just going to put it right under here, and we'll see whether or not it does pop up. All right, so let's go inside here. Let's see if it pops up over there. List to do should be right there. Awesome. So now we can do some real damage. Or, sorry, no, not real damage. We can do some real stuff. So I'm going to take in some fragments. And I'm going to go inside here, say fragment. And now I'm going to take in a table. So I'm going to use Bootstrap 4's tables. So I'm just going to go into W3 schools. So I already have it set up right here. If you want to get to where I'm at, simply what I did was I just wrote W3 school Bootstrap 4 tables. And the first thing that's going to pop up is this basic table. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this table tag over here to the end of the other table tag. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it right inside there. Okay? And I can see there might be some confusion, so just to double check we're on the same page, right? W3 school, Bootstrap 4 table, okay? And then you should be at the same location as I am. And then you could just click on this thing right here, and you'll be led to. So I'm going to start using W3 schools, and I'm just going to copy their codes and just put it directly into here to make our process a lot faster. So now if we look into a React application, you can see that we have our table. And we're just going to clean this up a little bit more. So first of all, you can see it was a little bit too close. So again, we're going to do a margin top 5. And I kind of want to do text center. So I'll do that as well. And we don't want to have first name, last name, or email. We want to first display the description. And then I want to display the edit button. And finally, I want to display the delete button. Now, we don't need these other data, but I am going to keep one for reference. So when I map each of the data once I fetch it, I want to be able to know how I should structure it. So I'm going to take John Doe, put him inside there, and I'm just going to delete the rest. All right, so let's see how that looks like. That should be a lot more cleaner. Okay, so let's get started. So I am going to be using a few things. I'm going to be using useEffect, and I'm also going to be using useState. So these stuff are going to help us with our process. So useEffect is going to make a fetch request to our RESTful APIs every time this component is rendered. Okay, so I'm going to go inside here. I'm going to write useEffect, and I'm going to write a function that's going to hit this one. So it's going to say get to-dos. Hasn't been created yet, so I'm going to create it at the top. So I'm going to get error, and yeah, I'll just do an error function again. So get to-dos, async. Sorry. Now I have to write async, and this is going to equal to try catch, and going to console.log the error.message. And let me just change this to error to make it better. All right. And then inside here, we're going to make another fetch request. So I'm going to say const response equals to await. So remember, we're going to make a fetch request right here to http://localhost 5000/todos. And by default, fetch makes a get request. So we can just keep it like this. And then next, I'm going to get some data back, but I can't just simply console.log it. I need to parse it. So we're going to be getting JSON data back. So I have to say const, let's say JSON data, and then I'm going to say response.json. So I'm going to have to parse it first because we're getting JSON data. And then now I can console.log JSON data. So let's see what we get as results. So let's go inside here. And let's check this out. Oops, I almost forgot as well that it does take some time to parse data. So we have to say wait for this as well. So things should start working once again. So cool, look at that. We get all our data from there. So now we can utilize this array and we can put it inside our use state. So we're going to create a state right here. We're going to say const, and let's just call these to-dos. And I'm going to say set to-dos. And I'm going to give it a default value of just an empty array. And after that, I'm going to set that JSON data into there. So I'm going to say set to-dos because that's the only way to change the state. And then I'm going to put inside JSON data. Okay? So in case you don't know what's going to be inside there, we can double check. And I could just run console.log to-dos. So this is our state. So let's see what we get from there. So as you can see, we're making a lot of requests, and that's because the thing about use effect is that it just keeps on like making requests once the render happens. So to ensure that we only make one request, I'm going to go inside here and I'm just going to put it like this. So this is going to only make it do one request, and now you can see that our state that we just console.log has all the data. So now we can start mapping all of these things and just spit it out. So I'm going to open this thing right here. I'm going to get rid of this console.log. And we're going to start mapping. So remember how I had to reference this thing? So I'm going to use the same exact structure. So I'm going to say todos.map. So we're going to have a to-do. And I am going to structure it as tr, because remember it's like this. And then the first td is going to be the results of to-do.description. How did I get this? Because if you look inside here, remember, if I open my console and I look at the data that we have, so I have to refresh this. Oh, oops. Sorry, let me console.log this again, so at least you guys can understand how I'm getting these data. So I'm just going to console.log to-dos. And then if we look inside here, you can see that we are going to be able to get access to description. So let's do that really quick. So I'm going to say to-do.description. And then finally, I'm just going to add a td that's going to have edit. And then I'm also going to have a td that's going to say delete. These are going to eventually be buttons, but at the meantime, we're just going to be focusing on mapping the data. And now, if we look into here, check that out. We're able to list all our descriptions, and then we have potentially our buttons that we're going to be using to edit information and to delete. So in the next section, we're going to start focusing on deleting, and then later on editing. Okay, so let's start focusing on our delete button over here. So I'm going to start opening this thing up, and I'm going to go to the bottom of this delete button right here, and I'm going to try to make it to a real button. So I'm going to say button, and it's going to say delete, and I'm going to add a class name of btn and btn danger, so it looks like a real danger button. Okay, so that should make it look a little bit better. There we go. Oops. Okay, let me get rid of that little sign over there. Okay, so now things should get a little bit better. So the thing about the delete button is that I want to have it have a onClick. So when I click on this thing, it's going to specify the ID that I'm trying to delete from this specific to-do, and then it's going to make a fetch request to delete that data. So let me explain. Immediately what you're seeing here is that I need to list all my unique keys. And the reason this is happening is because it wants to make sure all my to-dos are unique. So if I go inside here, I can simply say key, and remember my to-do ID is what makes my to-dos unique. So in the same concepts, I can use this to-do ID and put it inside here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say onClick, and I'm going to create a function that's going to, I'm going to create a function that's going to be called delete to-do. And it is going to take an argument of that to-do ID, so we can specify what exactly we want to delete. So I'm going to put inside here to-do ID. Okay? And now I'm going to start defining it. So you see we already have an error that's being spit out. So let's go to the top. So things are starting to get a tiny bit messy, so I'll just kind of add a comment here that this is going to be the delete function. I'm going to say const delete to do. It's going to also make asynchronous request. Then I'm going to do try catch, error, console.error, error.message. Okay, and inside here we're going to make a fetch request, specifically a delete fetch request, in order to delete that specific to-do in our RESTful API. So what I'm going to do is say const delete to do, and remember we're having an argument inside here, so I'm going to put ID inside here. So I'm going to say delete to do, and I'm going to say await, and it's going to be a fetch request to http://localhost 5000 to-dos, and then we have to specify the ID over here. So in this case, I'm going to make some template strings, and essentially template strings allows you to put variables within your strings. So I'm going to add $, and I'm going to add that ID over there. So remember, I'm going to go to to-dos, and I'm going to delete the ID that's specified as the argument that I passed inside there. Okay? So now, to make sure that we are truly doing this, oh, and I almost forgot that I also have to configure this as a delete. So I'm going to add an object over here, and I'm going to say the method is going to be delete. Okay? And that's all I'm going to be doing. And to ensure that everything is working all right, let's just do console.log delete to do to see that whether or not it was successful. So let's go inside here. Let's go for, let's say, for example, this one. So let's say I click delete, and you can see that we have a status of 200. So this was I need to clean my room. So let's make sure we deleted that. So it should delete this one right there. So cool, we deleted the information. So that's all we need to do to delete information. And in the next section, oh, sorry, no, not in the next section. The thing is that I want to be able to instantly get rid of this. I don't want to keep refreshing because you can see it's still there. And after I refresh it, then it's going to go away, right? There's one less clean my room. So to ensure that we don't have to do this, I prefer to use a filter. So what I'm going to be setting is I'm going to say set to-dos, and I'm going to grab that to-do state that I have over there. I'm going to say to-dos, and then I'm going to do a filter. So filter essentially sets up a condition, and if the to-dos fit that condition, then it's only going to return those that qualified. So I'm going to say to-do, and I'm going to say if the to-do, that to-do IDs, so I'm getting all of the to-do IDs, does not equal to that to-do or to that ID that I specified inside my argument, then spit those out. So it's going to spit every other to-do except the ones that I'm trying to delete. So you'll see what I'm going to do pretty soon. So let's go inside here and check this out. So I have all these data I could just delete. Okay, look at that. So I could delete all these information, and it's going to shorten my array, and we can look inside here that the information was deleted. So cool. So in the next section, we're going to start editing our information. Alright, so let's start working on editing information. So I decided to just have a clean start. So let's say I need to clean my room again. And I'm just going to add that really quick so we can edit something at least. And I'll just add a second item to clean my floor. Very creative. Okay, so now that that's all set up, so I'm just going to go inside my edit to do. And I'm just going to make a simple component. Then I'm just going to say const edit to do. I'm just going to return a simple h1 that's going to say edit to do. And then I'm just going to export default that. And instead of putting it inside the app.js, I'm going to be putting it inside list to dos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top of this, and then I'm going to import that. So I'm going to say import edit to do from /edit to do. And now I can go to the bottom right here, and instead of having that edit button or that edit text being displayed, I can put it inside that component. So now let's see what this looks like. Okay, so we have two very big ones, but at least we know it's going to be working. So now we can do some real things with this edit to do component. So I'm going to open this fragments, and we're just going to put it right here. All right, so let's go back into W3 schools, and then we're going to, so if you can join me, we can write W3 schools, bootstrap 4, and then modal. So I already have it all set up. And then you can click on this, and the first thing you're going to see is this blue button, which is exactly what we need, because if we click on it, we want to display a modal. So I'm going to take all of this data right here, and then I'm going to go to my edit to do, and I am going to spit it in here. And you're going to get an error, so we just get rid of all these comments. All right, modal header needs to go away too, and I think, nope, there's one more. All right, so now if I refresh this, or if I save it, data should be different. So if we look inside here, you'll see that we have a button. So right here, we can like open things up. So I'm going to change this to an edit button, and I'm just going to modify this by having another edit button here along with an input, so we can edit our information. Let's do that. So instead of open model, I'm going to say edit, and then I'm going to go down here and say edit to do. All right. And then instead of modal body, I'm going to have a simple input. Input type of text, we'll just keep it like that for now. And also I think I should add a class name of form control to make it look a little bit better. And then remember, I want to have a edit button besides the close button. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it right there. Call it edit. And this is going to be red, so I want to make this warning. To keep it consistent, I'm also going to make this warning as well. So let's see how this looks like. So we go inside here, you'll see that this looks it looks a little bit better than our last one. So now we can put in some data, and then we can click edit to edit the information. So currently at the moment, this description doesn't have any correlation with this edit modal. So we need to pass that props inside this edit component. So remember, in list to-dos, we are just mapping all those different types of to-dos. So we can add that as a prop for edit to-do component. So I'm just going to add to-do inside here. And now we have this for disposal. So go to edit to-do, and let's add inside here to-do, because as a prop, I'm going to destructure it. And to ensure that we're on the same page, console.log to-do to see what I'm talking about. So if I open my inspect, so you see what I'm talking about, you see now each of these items have access. So each of these add to-dos have access to these things. So you can see that this one goes with I need to clean my room, and then this one right here goes with that second item right there. All right, so I'm going to open this back up, and now I want to be able to display it. So I'm going to have to keep track of it. So I'm going to take a new state. And now I'm going to say const description, and then I'm going to say set description because I want to set a new description later on, and a new state. So I'm not going to set it to an empty string, but rather, since I already have this to do, I'm going to set it by default to do description. The reason for this is because I want to edit the information, so I already need to know what's already there. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to set the value to that. So it's going to be description. So let's check this out really quick. Look inside here, you'll see that I need to clean my room, but you're also going to notice something really strange, is that if I click on this, it's going to say, I need to clean my room as well. It's not, I need to clean my floor. Now, the reason for that is because the correlations are wrong. So a modal works this way. When you click on a button, it's going to target a specific ID, and then in this case, this ID is my modal, so it's always going to be opening this modal. So we need to ensure that each of these buttons and each of these modals are unique. So let's make sure that these things are different. And the best way to make sure it's unique is we can use that to do ID. So let's do that really quick. So I'm just going to use the numbers. Now you can't just use numbers with your IDs. So you also need to put like a string on top of that. So I'll do that really quick. So I'm going to say template strings, and I'm going to say ID, and then I'm going to add that to do ID. So this is what it's going to look like, in case you're still a little confused of what's happening. So if I do it like this, essentially what I'm writing is going to be ID is going to equal to ID, and then it's going to be whatever number we specified. So it's going to look like that, and then we're going to target that. So I'm going to go inside here, and I'm going to say $, this, and I'm going to say, oops, sorry, not $, yet. Let me get rid of this. Okay, I'm going to run a template string, and I'm going to do the hashtag, because we're targeting that ID, and then I'm going to say ID, and then I'm going to specify that number. All right, so now they're all unique, and they'll present each other when we click on their individual buttons. Now, if I click on I need to clean my room, you'll see it's right there. And now if I click on this one, it should say I need to clean my floor. So cool. So the next step is that I want to edit this information and then click edit to transform it or to update it. So I'm going to go down here and I'm just going to go over to my input and I'm going to run the unchanged because I want to change the information. So inside here, I'm going to say E is going to equal to set description. And I'm going to say E that target that value. So now I can change this thing. Oops. And I also have to add this as well. Don't forget that. And now if I click edit, I can start adding some information into this thing. Okay, so next, what's going to happen after that is that when I click this edit button right here, I want to be able to send that data. So this one right here is going to be changing the description state, and this one is going to send that description state to update it. So I'm going to set onChange this. Sorry, not onChange, and onClick. And it's going to send a request to, let's set it to update description. So this is a function that we're going to be using. And I'm going to put E inside there. All right, so we haven't set this up yet, so let's do that right now. And I'm just going to add comments because it might be a little bit clustered. So edit description function. And what I'm going to be doing inside there is that I'm going to make that function. So I'm just going to do error function. So it was called, what did I call it as? I think it was edit description. Oh, it's update description. Sure, I'll just do that. So update description, error function. And I also want to make this asynchronous, so I'll just add that right there. A regular try catch, error console dot error, error dot message, and I'm going to pass that E because I don't want this thing to refresh yet. I want it to run my code. So E that prevent default. Okay, so that looks pretty solid. So now it's time for us to send a request. So remember, anytime we're going to be adding data, we have to package this thing. So I'm going to say const body is going to equal to that description. Okay, so I'm packaging it all up, and then now I'm going to send a response to my RESTful API. Oh, if I could spell response. And I'm going to say await, fetch, and I have to specify that route. So http://localhost 5000/todos, and then remember we have to also specify the ID. So let's make this template string again. And we're just going to say to-do ID, right? Because each one has their own unique ID over there. So once we specify this, we also have to configure it a little bit more because, like I said again, this is automatically going to make a GET request. So I have to make an object to say that the method is actually going to be a put request because we're updating. Then the headers, that's going to be a content type. Make sure you put that strings. So it's going to be a content type, and inside here it's going to be application/JSON. And then I have to add that body over there. So again, I'm going to package it all up, json.stringify, and then I'm going to put in that body over there. So if all works well, and I guess just to double check on this, let's just console.log the response to make sure that everything is working. So let's do this really quick. Let's go out here. I'm going to inspect. So I'm going to go to my console, and I'm going to see if I can actually edit this information. So I'm going to say, let's actually change this up a little bit. So I'm going to edit this and say, wash the dishes. So I'm going to edit this. So it says that it was a status of 200. That's a great sign. And now what we can do is we can check inside our command line to see whether or not that actually did work. And it says wash the dishes. So cool. So we're able to update our information. So the only thing that we need to do left is just do window location / So we're just going to start refreshing it so we can see the changes being done. Okay. So now if you look at that, you can see that changes has been done. I can even change this back to car. And you can see the data has been updated. Okay, cool. Okay, so what's next? Well, there's something a little bit weird with this, is that if I see wash the dishes, and let's say that I want to wash the clothes, and let's say I don't actually want to change it this way. So if I X out of this and I go back, it doesn't change it back to wash the dishes. I don't want that. I want to be able to make sure that this thing changes back to its original description. So let's go back into our coding editor and let's do that. So I'm going to open this thing right here. Okay, so since that thing is set up right there, what else? Okay, so whenever we click on this X button right here, so where is it? This X button, we want to make sure that we set it back to its original form. So I'm going to set it on click to this. And I'm going to be running set description, and I'm going to set it back to its original form. So let me show you that really quick. So if we go inside here, and we go back to our to-do list, and I edit this, and I want to change this to close, and I don't want to actually edit it, and I click X, it should change it right back to it. So nice. So we just need to apply this to the close button, and when we click outside. So let's go back inside here. There it is. I'm going to take this on click right there, and I'm going to apply it to all the other ones. So remember we had a close button, so I'm going to apply it to here. And when we click outside the modal button, I want to make sure it resets it itself again as well. So I'm going to be putting that inside, where is it? I'm going to put it right there. Okay, cool. So now let's just go back to this again. So if I decide to edit dishes now and I click outside, I'll change it back to its original form. And if I want to edit the information, and I click edit, oops. Okay, sorry, I accidentally clicked out. So let's say I want to clean the floor, and then I click edit. You'll see that it edits the information. I can also add data as well. Add that, and then finally I could delete it. So congratulations, you have officially worked on the PERN stack. So in the next section, what I'm going to do is give you guys a quick overview of what you guys did. Okay, so do you guys remember this graph? So this is exactly what we did. We created our React application, we click submit, edit, delete, and it sent an HTTP request to our RESTful API to instruct our database what needs to get done. Now I feel like a great way to review is just kind of going over how they interact with each other. So I'll just go over inside here and I'll just show you guys what's happening. So as you can see, this is our input to do. And right there, we sent an HTTP request to to-dos, made a post request, and we were setting a description as our body. So if you look inside here, this is exactly what we're going to be taking. So let me align it together. So when you make that request, it's going to hit this route. It's going to take that description that we just specified, and then it's going to insert that description to that value that we specified, and it's going to return it. Nice. Now, if we were to go to list to-dos, so remember what we did here is that we made a request to HTTP localhost 5000/todos. So if you go down here, you can see all we did is hit that route. We selected all the to-dos, and then we returned it back to here. And then we set that as our state. And then if you look over to our edit and delete, so we actually didn't do get a to-do, but don't worry, it's not much different. So we go to update a to-do. Where is it at? Oh yeah, there it is. So whenever we were going to update something, we had to specify exactly like what the to-do was going to be. So I had to hit /todos, specify the IDs, also say it's a put request, and then I had to send the data that I want to replace it with. So in this case, it was going to be description right there. So after that, it updated it, set the description to what I specified, and I told it where it was going to be located at, which was to-do ID. And then finally, when we deleted something, all we had to do, and I think it's inside here. Yeah. So anytime we deleted, all we had to do was specify the method was delete and hit this route and specify also the ID of it. So if you look down here, you can see that we put inside, we passed this ID, and then we took that ID over there, and then we deleted it from that to-dos table where that to-do ID equals to that. Okay? So I think you're starting to understand of how these things are being put together and how like full stack applications are being built with the PERN stack. So again, congratulations. From here on, I think a best ways to really kind of help you build applications is really just kind of start building your own applications. Maybe try building the to-do list without watching this tutorial and really test yourself on whether or not you really mastered of just working with the Postgres database. Okay, but besides then, congratulations, and I wish you best of luck in building your other applications.